Up next, we have a panel presentation. We brought in over 3 decades of experience within these three individuals. I'm very excited for this. We have Tracy Apps, Rich Tabor, and Anthony Ferrara, and I'm excited. We talk about the designing tools for the future. We came up with a handful of questions, and between the three of them, they are designers, developers, small business owners, and I think they have a lot to offer. And so I'm very excited for this. So please join me in welcoming the three of them to the stage. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's panel. We are going to be talking about designing tools to build the future. We've got an excellent group of panelists here with us today. So without waiting anymore, let's just go around quickly and have each of our panelists introduce themselves. Give us your name. Tell us a little bit about how you got into design and maybe a little bit about your design background or your background in WordPress. So let's start with you, Tracy.
Thank you. So my name is Tracy Apps. My last name actually is Apps. I've been working on WordPress since around 2004. But I got into design well before that. I remember finding the internet back in 1996 and seeing people having these home pages. And I was like, oh, this was amazing. I stayed up all night and made my first homepage. And it was just a way, I was like, this is amazing, a way to be able to connect to people and not just making technology for technology's sake, but I was seeing how people came together and I made friends and made community. And so that really inspired me to start creating for the web, and the rest is history.
Nice. I'm Rich Tabor. So I've been creating in and for WordPress over the last 11 years or so, designing and engineering WordPress experiences all around. I started out as just a designer at a local marketing agency making email headers way back. And through the years, I've kind of progressed, and now I just actually joined Automatic as a product manager, leading some product on WordPress.org.
Nice. My name is Anthony Ferrara. I've been a designer since I was 15. I am 31 now, so I'll let you do the math. But I've been primarily a UX designer. I run an agency called Oxy. We build marketing websites and do product design for some of the world's biggest companies, and lead a small team. Before that, I was a freelancer, worked at a startup accelerator. I got my start at my local church. I had a mentor who kind of ran sound and lights, and he had a MacBook, and he kind of showed me everything he was doing, freelancing, helped me get my first client, which I still have today, which is a pretty crazy story. But I'm excited to talk to you all and get through some interesting questions.
Yeah, awesome. And thank you for the introduction. And I feel like we've got some great background here. So I'm excited to get some different perspectives as we go through some of these questions. So for the first question, Tracy, I'd love to get your opinion on this. When you're meeting with a client and you're kind of looking at the blank canvas of a website, can you kind of take me through what steps you make beforehand to make sure that you're delivering what the client is looking for?
This is an excellent question, because one of the things when I teach user experience design as well as perform it in professional setting, and I always say become like the toddler in the room and always asking why, and continuing to just ask all these questions, because a blank canvas can be frightening because there's so many different possibilities, but asking the questions and then continuing to just kind of peel away the onion, the layers of the onion of what the problem is, finding out what that client is really passionate about. What is the problem? What is their goal? What is going to be success? What does success look like for them? So asking questions after more questions and more questions, to get to the root of the problem, and not just say like, oh, well, I like this or I like this design, but see like, no, this is what my goals are. This is my business goal. This is my personal goal. And going from there, to be able to get to that root and start that design, to find out what they're really looking for.
Yeah, and after spending the holidays with a handful of toddlers, that example is very relative
But
to me right
why?
now.
But why?
Why? Yeah, yeah. Anthony, I'd love to get your opinion on this as well. You know, as I know you work with a lot of clients, and as you're working with them, what steps do you take to make sure that you're delivering what the client is working for? Because often, like Tracy said, you have that blank canvas, almost paralysis, and sometimes the client doesn't even know what exactly they're looking for, but that's why they're coming to you to kind of help guide them through that path.
Yeah, I mean, Tracy took most of the words out of my mouth, honestly. Asking really, really good questions. Um and I would agree with what Devin said too. Like oftentimes they don't actually know what they're asking for. They know a shell of what they're asking for, but if you can ask clarifying questions, like, how are you going to measure success? Is it an improved conversion rate? Is it how many people sign up, click the button and sign up the demo form? Then you can optimize for those success metrics. Also, understanding like what in some way you have to know the business as well as they do. That's something I always say. I need to know the business as well as you do, to create something for you that's going to be successful. You also need to know like their target audience, like as well as you possibly can. And then you, as the designer, can it's your job to marry the vision with the audience, the business needs with the audience needs, and then kind of have like a clearer picture of the constraints. And I think defining the constraints, what are we not doing, is just as important as like, what do you want to do with this site? But I think that's how I would take it.
Yeah, almost just as important as the why is the why not, or like what are we not going to get into? Yeah, I think that's great, and I think as y'all were speaking about that, it's almost like someone's commissioning an artist for a painting to some degree. If I can put you all on that high of a pedestal where it's just like, okay, I'm gonna create this piece of art, and obviously I'm gonna leverage technology to help build it, but I need to make sure that what I'm creating for you is the vision that you have in your mind. Like as a designer, as a creator, I feel like that's partially your job, is to help bring that to life. Rich, I want to kick this next question over to you. You all have been designing and working in WordPress for quite some time, and full site editing is something that's been buzzing around for a while. It's like the next big thing, it feels like, in WordPress. It's the next evolution. So for someone that's newer to WordPress, can you tell us specifically or simply what full site editing is and what it means to the average user? What problem does full site editing solve?
Yeah, sure. Full site editing is like the more technical term surrounding the whole effort of making an entire site block based. And that happens with what we're calling the site editor. Historically, block editing happened within the post content. So it was within an editing a post or editing a page, you would have the editor there, and anything that happened above or below it or on the sidebar was completely somewhere else within typically your theme would provide a header.php or footer.php file and run it that way. Well, now the full site editing experience takes those headers and those footers and any other parts that were traditionally put into a theme and bakes them as blocks so that they're entirely editable. You can take a theme's out of the box header and swap it with another header in 2 or 3 clicks now. And it's really empowering in that a theme traditionally kind of locks you in, for better or worse, to what you get. Now it's a starting point. It's a bunch of components and patterns and pieces that are all coming together to make the site editor a very powerful editing experience.
That's awesome. Tracy or Anthony, do you have anything to add to full site editing or anything with that?
Well, one of the things that, especially that whole block concept, is something that we talk about in design all the time, design systems. So it really is giving that kind of those same tools, that same the same tools to someone who's not a developer, or a quote unquote professional designer, which I think everyone is a designer, because if everyone creates something. So it's kind of cool to be able to kind of, we wanted to democratize publishing. Well, now we're kind of democratizing design and creation and all of it all together.
That's very cool. I like that a lot. And you mentioned tools. I want to actually fast follow up with you on a question with that, Tracy. You've been in WordPress for a while, and I'm sure you've seen many iterations and evolvements and developments in the WordPress project. How do you kind of adjust your supporting tool set as a designer, and as you're trying to build the right thing for clients? Like, how do you make sure that you have the right tool set that goes with the current iteration of WordPress?
That's it goes down to like, well, figuring out not only what we're doing, but what we're not doing. But I've really just seen WordPress come from, a blogging platform, which was limiting unless you were a developer. And now, and you were locked into your theme and all of those things. You had to kind of figure out where the things were. And so when we say WordPress is easy to use, but it's not easy to like create exactly what we want unless you were a developer. Now we've seen these tools that are giving more and more power to the end user without any sort of gatekeeping when it comes to the creation of it. So when I'm looking at for the tool set with how WordPress has developed now, honestly, I look more at what the technical level of my client, as well as how much time they want to spend in it. And if they want to learn and they have this time, they have all, like having all of those tools to be able to, I can get out of the way and let them be able to express themselves through the design. If not, I can curate exactly what they need and then make it really easy for them to just be able to, design the things they need to, and then not have to worry about all of the other stuff. So it's more or less figuring out, what's the effort level that the client wants to put into, and tailoring which tools I can just unlock for them or let them have full reign to, just depending on that.
Yeah. And I think part of doing that effectively is an immense knowledge of the ecosystem in which you all operate. And I have utmost respect for you for being able to have that knowledge with those different tools, different resources, and different things that you can use when you're designing for the client based on their needs. I think that's very, very impressive. And I want to talk a little bit about kind of the past, present, and future of WordPress. And Rich, I want to guide this question in your direction, although obviously Tracy and Anthony, you can weigh in as well. You've been in the WordPress project for a while, and when you look at the progress that WordPress has made as a platform and an ecosystem in the last decade, I'd be curious from you, what is a milestone or two that you think is the most impactful looking back? And also looking to the future, what's a milestone that you're excited about seeing come to fruition?
Yeah, looking back, I would say 100% my number one milestone is the introduction of Gutenberg, like bringing that in. Yeah, it was rocky at first. In some senses, it needed to be ironed out, and it's still, on the process of being ironing out. I don't know that we'll get to a place where we're done with this. It's a constant evolution of software and experience. But bringing Gutenberg into WordPress really did mark this new era of WordPress, like this new era of blocks. And now we're seeing with the site editor, like this new era of building sites and unlocking the creative potential of folks who might not have the ability to code in WordPress. So it's that to me is the biggest thing looking back. Looking forward, I would say collaborative editing. So taking a true Google Docs or Figma type experience where it's very collaborative and building that into WordPress. I think that would be quite advantageous, especially for the agency folks who are kind of teaming up, and even you can have like client access where you're kind of working one-on-one in a document, whereas now it's kind of a one or the other type of interaction.
Yeah, I'm sure all of us have been around for long enough to remember the pain of working on a blog post or something, or on a page, and then being like, okay, I think I'm good with this, and then having someone else refresh the page or have some, do something that just kind of overwrites your work before you can save it. And so that collaborative part is very exciting as well. Anthony or Tracy, anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, when talking about WordPress as a platform, it's hard not to compare it to other tools, and I still think it's the most robust. When you talk about Webflow, when you talk about other tools that clients have options for, I still think, the majority of the sites being built are still on WordPress. WordPress is still king. There's the biggest ecosystem for it. Um, it's the safest bet still for in a sea of competitors that are coming up for. I always tell my clients, if I get hit by a bus, there's going to be a million people that use WordPress. There's a great community behind it. And even when you go to any other platform, it becomes a smaller community, newer product, and there's a little bit of risk there. So the collaborative nature of some of these more modern tools, Figma as an example, the ability to do live editing and commenting and version control, and or it's like 3 or 4 tools in one. That's stuff that I would really like to see fold into more of the builds that I'm working on, and not have to leverage third-party apps as much. And I am primarily more on the design side. I rely on development partners, so I'm not going to speak too out of place when we're talking about specific plugins or things like that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And kind of in that same vein, Tracy, I've got a question for you. I'm sure we've all heard the Henry Ford quote: "If I asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse." And he said that in reference to when he built Model T, first automobile. Taking a step away from the client WordPress relation, I'd love to kind of get your thoughts on the WordPress project when you're working, not necessarily with a client, but on the actual WordPress project to improve the project. Can you share a little bit about your process on figuring out what tools will be helpful? Obviously, Rich mentioned collaborative workspaces and things like that, but do you have a group in mind or a client in mind when you're trying to think of improvements? Or tell us a little bit about that process.
Well, I've had a really diverse set of clients. So I have, well, I remember when my grandfather was still alive, and he had these reading glasses next to his computer. And I remember I'd have him look at my website, and if he had to bring those reading glasses out, and I was like, oh, I need to fix that. Or like, oh, look, there, he kept clicking on the page title, thinking, oh, I want to go to that page. And that was the page you were on. So those kinds of things, like I like to think about, there's no one size fits all for clients. So it really boils down to testing, doing, like, I would run some just really simple tests. And that's, user testing, usability testing is that can be really scary, but it doesn't require like hundreds of dollars of equipment. You can literally like use a webcam and then just put a script and then have someone go through your site, or my parents on their smartphones, and just have them say like, hey, can you find where this is? And those kinds of tests, one of the hardest things to do as a designer is to ask those questions and then not help, because you're like, but those things are so eye-opening. And I think that everyone should run some usability tests just to see, like, oh, the things that I thought were a universally understood thing are actually not. So there is no just one blanket client I think of. So always thinking, all right, I have a lot of experience. I've been doing this for over 20 years. But you know what? That's a downfall for me, because then I'm like, oh yeah, I know this. I've seen this before. Mm-hmm. That's not necessarily the case. I need to go in as a designer and say, will be excited to be wrong in this situation. I am not going to assume anything. I want to test everything. And with whichever client, whichever thing, just a simple test with a family member, and amazing how much you'll learn about those kinds of things and those biases that you already have.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something that I hope to hear a little bit more on. We'll kick this over to you, Anthony. how do you challenge your bias and ensure that you're designing for your audience? I love Tracy's example of grandfather's glasses, you know, like I love that, you know, perhaps the first accessibility test, and it'd be great if more people thought that way, but just on a larger scope and scale, obviously we all have biases to some degree. How do you ensure that you are kind of stepping away from your bias and designing for your audience and for your clients?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I don't, I think I don't know if there's one particular specific way that everyone needs to do it, but just really just having empathy for the persona that you're designing for. I could recall a project. It was early on in my career, and it was for a diner. And it was like it was just a restaurant. And the first take at designing the website, I designed what I thought, represented my experience going to this diner. It was by a college campus. Had a lot of great memories there with college friends, and it's a simple minimalist place. You can get a breakfast for like $12. And we launched the site, and it performed horribly because it kind of conveyed a much more luxurious experience, and it was kind of a value diner. And I didn't really that was probably the first moment in my career where I was like, oh, I need to understand the positioning of the business and the clientele that positioning services, or else if I just make what I like, I might have a unique experience that nobody else, but the majority doesn't. And talking to the existing I could have talked to existing customers. I could have, like asked the client if he would comp a couple meals, and I would talk to customers that were there and kind of understand why they like going to this place, what it means to them, what they're, it could have got a lot of user feedback. And I think designers wear a lot of their identity in the way that they dress and the way that they think. And, when you're not designing, you're not always designing for yourself. So it's hard to separate those two things. You're as work for hire. You got to understand the audience, and you got to understand the client, and kind of marry all three of your goals: your personal goals as a designer, the client, and the customer.
Yeah, the way I kind of look at it, just to tag on to both Tracy and Anthony, is that, there are subjective and objective design principles, and knowing what principles go into which category is a developed skill, and it takes a lot of effort and energy. And it's not something that you can just learn once and put aside. You have to keep pursuing that knowledge. And once you kind of learn that, you know what part of your taste and your style you can influence into these designs, but also keep them proper to what the actual end goal is and what that job to be done, and how to help that client be successful.
And there's a lot of different fun tools. I actually found these cards about different cognitive bias and things like that. So there's a bunch of little things like that, and they're really great, like design things. And, even being a designer that studies this and teaches it, like having nice little reminders like this, websites that you learn a lot about, how we function as human beings, how our brains work, and by learning about these different theories. And that doesn't, especially someone that's like, oh, I don't have the formal training, but there's tons of resources that that everyone can really contribute greatly to diving into some of these things, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's all very, very informative. I like what Rich is saying, and I'm sure that Tracy and Anthony, you apply this as well in some way, just about the subjective and the objective rules. It's like hard rules. We're not going to have a million pop-ups that are jumping up at the user everywhere, and softer rules where it's like we can make sure that we're going to use colors that reflect your brand and things like that. So I think that's. I feel like that's a principle that I've seen all over the internet, obviously, but maybe have never just heard quite said that succinctly. So I really appreciate that. I want to take a little bit of a shift here and go into technology with the website. And I know that technology has been advancing very, very quickly. I think it's like every 18 months or something like that. It's like technology doubles, or that, don't fact check me on that, but I've heard a stat like that it's just technology is advancing so quickly. And I'd be curious what you all think technology's biggest downfall is in the past, and how you think we're addressing those issues as we're going forward, specifically as it kind of ties into websites and the internet. Just to kind of set the stage, I know that the internet, I view it as a tool, right? Where it's like you can use its powers for good, like a hammer, and you can also, there's the uglier side of the internet that can be not for good. So I'd love to just kind of get a very, very brief thought on that from you all.
I'll start because one of the things that I see as technology, the biggest downfall, is really just the fact that it's been created by such a homogeneous personnel. Like basically, the diversity within technology is been an issue, and because of that, we run into things like tools that don't actually serve the needs of every single person. And one of the things that I've seen is people that are like, oh, well, I'm not a designer, or I don't do these things, or, oh, I'm not that good at this design, or I'm not this. But their life experiences, just them as a person, makes them a crucial tool to be able to help improve technology for the future. And people don't realize that they have the power of that. Even if you aren't technical, I'm not technical, well, then your voice is that much more important in technology, because technology isn't just for the technologically savvy. It's supposed to be for everyone. And if we're only having the techie people that are creating the tools, well, then they're going to be for the techie people. And that's what we've been running into as an issue. And so I encourage everyone, if you're not technical at all, but you have an interest in it, that's exactly what we need in the tech industry to help it move forward, to make these tools for the future to be better and for globally for everyone.
For sure, yeah.
Go for it, Anthony.
I'll keep it quick. The three ideas that come up is lack of accessibility, which is very similar to what Tracy was speaking on. Like, to get a job at a grocery store, they force you to apply online, and if you're colorblind, or if you're in a wheelchair, or if you are from another part of the world where it's not so familiar to apply for these things, it becomes very difficult to just navigate society. And there's that's a whole wormhole conversation on its own to think about. All, like, the first thing a user experiences is like, is this in my language? Is the text big enough? If you don't pass that, they don't care about how beautiful your photography is, or how well thought out your tech stack is, or anything. The second one is just negative social impacts. I am a new dad, and to just see my 5-month-old, like, how addicted to screens she is, and how it emotionally affects her when that's away from her visibility. Fast forward into whatever kind of social impacts that's affected me in my life, and all of us. I think that that's a whole nother wormhole conversation. And then just economic disruption with AI and all kinds of crazy tools. Every time there's a new development, a whole industry is kind of shattered and has to relearn something new. And we're constantly trying to keep up, and it becomes challenging. And just I think those are the three things that come to mind.
Yeah, and not to lump any of you in with me, but I can remember the time before smartphones. I can remember the time before cell phones, and so it's crazy to think that the youth today, they're being raised in a smartphone world. I'm sure we've all seen that clip online of the kid that's like trying to swipe on the book cover, and like not understanding why this iPad that's actually a tangible book isn't acting like the iPad that they're used to, and I completely agree with you, Anthony. It's just like this interesting double-edged sword. We've made technology so intuitive for some people that it's almost to our detriment.
I actually, this is like a thing that people do on Twitter, but I actually used AI to come up with that list.
Oh, very interesting.
Nice.
Very
I
interesting.
agree with the list. That's the scary part.
So next question I want to ask is kind of along that same vein of thought. Who is responsible for ensuring ethical and inclusive design practices are followed when creating the tools for the future? Not necessarily designing the sites, but the tools that are being built. I'd love to, we'll start with Tracy and then go to Anthony, and then Rich, if you have any thoughts, love to hear them as well.
Everyone. That really, when being a UX designer, I'm always thinking about, okay, well, who are we missing? Who's not at the table? All this stuff. But it also it doesn't completely work unless everyone's kind of thinking that, all the way up from the CEO, all the way down to the intern. And that kind of mentality, that it gives that power to everyone, because it really does take the entire team to ensure, because we don't know what we don't know, and we need the collective of everyone to be thinking about it, because these aren't easy answers. Ethics in technology, accessibility, inclusivity, these are not just a check a box, done. So it is something that requires everyone to kind of come together and think about it from all levels.
Yeah, agreed. It's a big question, but yeah, I think like bad business models breed bad practices. Like where if you're like I think there's all kinds of quotes like show me the incentive and I'll show you a way to like manipulate it or something. And at the top of major technology companies, what are we incentivizing our users to do? What are we incentivizing our internal team to do? I think even something that like I've implemented at my agency, just like the small things that a leader can do in their org, I think is just try to hire people that don't look and sound or from the places that you are, like challenge yourself to, because you automatically just get a different perspective on life and in the way that you hire, pull from different talent pools, don't use the same recruiting agency, don't use the same job board that you did for the last hire. And then incentivize the right things. Like we try to do like a small thing we try to do is like try to do one pro bono project, whether that's a local nonprofit or WordPress is amazing for this. There's so many free resources and tools, whether they're accessibility tools or whatever, that people contribute to and spend lots of time and money to make the web a better place. And I think I look at engineers and developers as having the right value system there. They build and share. Designers don't like to share so much. So I don't know. Those are the things I think about.
Yeah, I think that's great. And Rich, if you have anything, just jump in. But I think what kind of comes to mind is a take a penny, leave a penny. What Tracy was saying, where it's like it only really works if everyone kind of buys in. If other people aren't thinking about it, then it's just take a penny. But you need people that are willing to leave a penny for the next person to take a penny. And I think that only works if we think about that in a technological way as well, where it's like, okay, I recognize that there's going to be someone in the future that might not have the same resources that I do. So this is me kind of making my deposit, for lack of a better term, into that future. I might not know who that person is. I might not know their story or their needs, but I know that in this current situation, I have an abundance of resources, and it falls on my shoulders to make sure that I can share that abundance in some way with someone that comes after me. And obviously I'm paraphrasing, and that's I know that's not exactly what you're saying, but that's kind of my interpretation what you're saying. And if you disagree strongly, then please just let me know. But I think that's one way to look at it for sure. Okay, going on to our second to last question, and this has been very enlightening for me and very fun as well. I like having these conversations. Anthony, you mentioned that one of your responses, you leaned on AI to kind of help generate an answer, and it seems like AI has blown up in a very interesting way, even in the past months. I know my Facebook feed has been littered with everyone changing their profile picture to 15 different AI generated versions of themselves. And we've also seen AI content generators emerge. So it's like we have AI art, we have AI content. It seems like there's so much, and I'm sure they're only going to get better. I would love to get Anthony your thoughts on this first, since you brought it up, and Rich, if you have any thoughts on this, please let us know. But with the emergence of AI contributors, how does that affect the design process and the way that creators approach building for the web?
Yeah, I think this story is actively being written right now. The ways that it's changed my process in the last couple of weeks, and some of these, like GPT chat is only like a couple months old at this point. Some of those visual AIs, Dolly, Midjourney, Jasper.ai is for blog posts. It's really like the verbal to the visual. There's like, even before, when you first start a web project, you have to interview, get all the ideas of the client's head or the stakeholder's head and document it, have everyone agree on it. And then at that point, you have these tools that can generate, web page content. If it's chat GPT or Jasper.ai, they can spit out an entire 20 blog posts to like start your website with, as long as you have a decent idea of the keywords you're trying to rank for. And I see our reliance on copywriters has lowered pretty heavily over the last like couple weeks, and we feel a little bit more confident that these tools can help us get 80 75 80% of the way there. Where the human comes in is to massage it, to make sure that it captures the brand voice, or it has that emotional quality that a human needs to, because a lot of these tools generate kind of generic sounding text, but they're scary good, and they're only going to get better. And I think it's going to impact our lives way more quickly than Bitcoin is in the short term. Maybe not in the long term, but and then the visual tools, the thing I can't stop thinking about is it's always been about like like the idea, like what is the business idea, what is the website idea, where's the opportunity, what is the right prompts to put into these tools. You still have to be very creative. It's not going to eliminate creativity, I don't think, but you're just going to have this engine that is just incredibly powerful, that if aimed and used in the right way can help you produce projects faster, not have to rely so much, for cheaper. You maybe don't have to purchase as much stock imagery. You're just more powerful as a single creator. I think there's a lot of legal challenges of like, like for visuals, like who owns all of the, if it's derived from a particular artist, like should that artist get paid? And I think there's a lot of questions of like how it's actually going to all fizzle out. But those are some small ways that we're using it. I think it's our design process doesn't really change. It's just we need to consider these tools because they're really good, and they're pretty efficient. And how do you massage the outputs that they generate to resonate with the human? Because we build sites for humans still, and until that changes, then I think it's only going to help us do what we do a little bit more efficiently.
Yeah, awesome. And Rich, same question to you. Let me just rephrase it so it's top of mind for you. With the emergence of AI contributors, how does that affect the design process and the way that creators are approaching building for the web? I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, like Anthony was saying, it's all about inputs. Those prompts, like knowing how to get what you want out of these new AI systems is a developing skill, and leaning in and figuring out exactly how they can help you create, but more importantly, guide the creative process should probably be top of mind for, I would say, almost any creative right now that's leaning in professionally. And when you think of some examples, like taglines and content, like being able to rephrase it, even like make it more or less technical, change the tone of voice or the sentiment, like taking even your content and kind of morphing it like that is really powerful and opens a whole frontier of content editing. Or even like, how do like if you had a sunglasses shop and you're like, give me some fun tacky sunglass taglines and to help me sell more in California. Like you can be that specific and it will give you 5 or 10 and you're like, let's change this, as morph these up a little bit. Like you can do that, which helps, like, maybe your client doesn't know what would be a fun, creative way to sell sunglasses. That helps lean you in that process. Or even, if we look at like web design, like if you could spin up a site for, like a lawyer site, for example, on WordPress out of blocks with a prompt that takes your locale into reference and takes the competitors in your area and tries to figure out like what makes them successful, how are they ranking, and what tone are they using, and put that into your site creation tool. Like I think the sky's the limit on how these can be used and how they can power creativity, for sure. It's just a matter of digging in and starting now to learn what's capable and kind of following up as it continues to evolve.
Yeah, I think that's I think it's going to be very interesting, and I think if I can kind of distill some of the things that we've spoken about into a sentence or two, it seems as though the technological bar is being lowered. You no longer have to be a very experienced designer to still be able to step in and to create something amazing. But the need for voices has raised. We've talked about this a little bit in the ethics of it and just how to express your creativity. And I think that's what we wanted to encapsulate in this panel, but also as Bluehost with this event, that everyone has a voice out there. And it seems like it's becoming less important that you know how to code a website from the bottom up, and more important that you let your voice be heard, that you contribute your voice to this, because in the end, that's what's unique to you. That's what's unique to your website, is how your voice shines through. And it seems like the technology has come to such a point that we even have AI that can help you find that voice and help give you a framework that you can use. And then, as you said, Rich and Anthony, you can massage that to make sure that it is a reflection of your vision. So really grateful that you all took the time to meet with us today and to chat about this. I have one final closing question that I'd love to hear from all of you as our kind of parting inspiration. I hope that there's a handful of people tuning in today that are aspiring designers, and as people that have gone through it for years now, decades even, you've been designers, you've been working with websites, building amazing things for clients. I would love to hear what you would recommend to people that are kind of at the beginning phase, looking into the future. What would you recommend to people, or what steps would you recommend that people take now in order to be better prepared for the future state of websites, whether that be in 5, 10, 15 years? I'd love if we could just go around and we'll close on these thoughts. So Tracy, please kick us off.
I love this idea. So this question, because one, I've always hated the term like pixel perfect, because I'm like, that doesn't matter. Who knows? The future, we might not have pixels. We might not have screens to be designing for. So caring less about the technology, and the tools that we're using, but looking at it as this is a paintbrush that's going to solve this problem. Technology is going to change. It's going to keep changing, and we don't know where it's going to go in the future. But designers and creators are always going to be needed to be able to solve problems. And as more and more technology advances and changes, there's going to be introduced additional problems that need to be solved. So honestly, I say just intentionally experience life, putting yourself into new and diverse situations and experiences, and take a notebook with you and see where are the needs, like who's getting left behind in this technology, wave that we have. Okay, well now what are the things that we can do to fix that, to change that, to bring more people that the support that this technology is supposed to be. It's supposed to make our lives easier. It doesn't always do that. So just experiencing things, learning things, traveling, trying new foods, all of those things actually help you be a better designer, just because you're starting to understand, human psychology. Learn, just people watch and see how people behave and like what patterns and all of these things, because it's fascinating. And as a designer, to be fascinated by people and how you can help each other in their lives in whatever situation, that is the key of being a designer in this future.
That was well said, Tracy. Yes. I would say, for aspiring designers, one thing I've mentioned a couple of times, and so has Tracy and Anthony, it's like the idea of learning and just never stop learning. Stay curious and push yourself into new areas and new territories and new technologies, and just stay creative. Like being able to, now that the tools are being, the barriers to entry are becoming lower for these tools. Like you can start expressing creativity in different ways, and that will just help you continue to evolve yourself. And then, while you're leveling up your skill set and your design knowledge, and, finding out what is subjective and objective, and kind of distilling those design attributes, you can start, what Tracy does this really well is like sharing your knowledge and teaching and being part of the bigger design community instead of keeping it to yourself. It's not about designing in a whole and then, I have something awesome, but then I just publish it tomorrow and there's no feedback and it's, it's quiet and messy. It's about designing in the open and getting that feedback and getting those tests done and even sharing it with other designers to, it is vulnerable to do that, to put something that's creative on to something else and say like, what do you think? That's hard to do, but that is what builds you up and builds those around you. So those are the things that I would say I would tell every aspiring designer that I can get in touch with.
For sure, yeah. This is my favorite question on here. We all were once aspiring tech people and designers and engineers, and there's probably some blog or some mentor or somebody in our life that like got us to this point and in our careers or whatever. But yeah, like mine is more like philosophical. Like always try to find a mentor. For me, like that was like there's a lot of people that have walked the road that you're trying to walk, and if you show initiative and you follow up and bother people enough, I'd be willing to help. I know I'm sure everyone here would as well. And then when you get to a certain point in your career, even if you don't feel like you're there, like try to pass on what you do know. Like always have a mentee, always have a mentor. Like that way you're living in like a bigger vision of like the world. You could see what's coming up. You could get wisdom from people in more established parts of their career. And then to filter all the noise, there's so many people online trying to sell design courses and trying to tell you to don't sleep and like work super hard and like forget about your family and friends. Like just take advice from people that you want to be. Like if they're a good person, look at the way they treat servers, look at what they stand for, look at how they talk to other people, look at the quality of their work. Don't just look at their outcomes or quality of their work, because they might not be, if you follow them, you might end up somewhere you're not happy with. But yeah, mentee, mentor, take advice from people who you want to be, look at their whole life.
Awesome. I love that. Well, Tracy, Rich, Anthony, I'm really grateful for your time. I'm grateful for the knowledge you brought today and your experience. I hope that people realize how valuable it is to have the three of you here with us today. I think it's immensely valuable. I think you bring really unique valuable perspectives. I know I keep saying valuable, but it is the truth, and I'm very grateful for each one of you and what you brought to this conversation, and also what you just bring to the ecosystem in WordPress and in the design workspace. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for your time today, and keep doing what you're doing. As a final sign off, let's just very briefly go around, and if you don't mind, just let people know where they can get in touch with you, or if they can follow along with the work that you're actively engaged in. We'll go again, Tracy, Rich, Anthony, and then we'll finish today.
Awesome. Thank you. I just had so much fun. This was really a great time. Most of the time you can find me, I am Tapps, Tapps on the internet, except on TikTok, where I am the real Tapps. But you can find me at tapps.design and see all my links there.
Thank you.
And I blog a lot about WordPress and the future of where blocks are going and full site editing and the site editor, all that at richtabor.com. And I'm on Twitter quite a bit, probably too much, at Richard_Tabor.
You can find a little bit more about my design agency, Oxy, at oxy.co, oxy.co. I am the most anti-social person on the internet, so if you want to follow me on social media, it's Anthony, ANDTHEKNEE.
Awesome. All right. Thanks again for your time, and I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.
See ya.
Thank you.